It was the summer of 1988, and I was just 18 when my friends and I decided to rent a house for a weekend getaway. We had heard rumors about a mysterious house on the outskirts of town, one that had been abandoned for years. Locals called it the Hollow House because it had supposedly been the site of strange occurrences, disappearances, and unexplained deaths. We thought it would be a fun adventure, an exciting escape from our mundane lives. The house sat alone, surrounded by thick woods, far away from any nearby town or road. As we drove up the long, winding driveway, I could already feel the eerie atmosphere. The house stood tall, its faded paint and broken windows adding to its foreboding presence. We all laughed nervously, trying to shake off the unsettling feeling in the pit of our stomachs. Come on, guys. It's just an old house. People probably made up those stories, Mike said, trying to lighten the mood. Still, as we got out of the car and approached the front door, the air seemed colder, the silence more oppressive. I hesitated for a moment, staring at the large, wooden door with its rusted hinges. It looked as though it hadn't been opened in years. "Let's get inside before it gets dark," Sarah suggested, her voice shaky. We pushed the door open, and it creaked loudly, almost like a warning. Inside, the house was even worse. Dust coated every surface, and the air was thick with the smell of damp wood and mildew. The furniture was old and decayed, and strange markings covered the walls, symbols I had never seen before. "This place is definitely creepy," Jack muttered, glancing around. The wind howled outside, and as the sun began to set, the house grew darker and colder. We decided to set up our things in the large living room, the only place that felt remotely safe. But as the night grew deeper, that sense of security quickly faded. At first, it was small things, lights flickering, strange noises echoing from the hallways. We dismissed them as the old house settling. But then, as we sat around the fireplace, trying to distract ourselves with ghost stories, the temperature in the room dropped drastically. "Is anyone else freezing?" Sarah asked, wrapping her arms around herself. Before anyone could answer, we heard it, a loud thud from upstairs. We all froze, exchanging nervous glances. For a moment, we all sat there in silence, listening intently. The thud was followed by a soft creaking sound, like footsteps moving slowly across the floor above us. My heart raced, and I could see the fear growing in everyone's eyes. "Maybe it's just an animal or something," Jack said, his voice betraying his attempt to sound calm. But we all knew that wasn't true. The footsteps were deliberate, too heavy to belong to any animal. Someone or something was upstairs. "We should check it out," Mike suggested, though he didn't look any more eager than the rest of us. "No way," Sarah whispered, her face pale. "We should just leave." But something kept us there, maybe a mix of curiosity and fear of what we'd find if we stayed. Or worse, what would happen if we ran? We grabbed the only flashlight we had, and one by one, we made our way up the narrow staircase, the old wooden steps creaking beneath our feet. The hallway upstairs was long and dark, lined with closed doors. The air felt heavier here, colder, like something was watching us. I could feel my heart pounding in my chest as we moved slowly toward the source of the noise. We stopped in front of one of the doors. It was slightly ajar, a dim light flickering inside, though we hadn't turned on any lights. Mike pushed the door open, and we all held our breath as the hinges creaked loudly. The room was empty, but the moment we stepped inside, the door slammed shut behind us and the temperature plummeted. We froze in place, the air now so cold we could see our breath. "I don't like this," Sarah whispered, her voice trembling. "Neither did I," There was something in that room with us, something we couldn't see but could definitely feel. The air was thick with tension, and then out of nowhere, we heard a faint whisper, so soft it was almost unintelligible, but it sent chills down my spine. "What was that?" Jack asked, his voice shaky. Before anyone could answer, the flashlight flickered and went out, plunging us into complete darkness. That's when we heard it again. Footsteps, this time moving quickly toward us. But there was no one there, no one we could see, at least. "Let's get out of here," I whispered urgently, but the door wouldn't budge. It was as if something was holding it shut, trapping us inside with whatever unseen presence lurked in the shadows. Panic set in. We all started pounding on the door, but it wouldn't open. The whispers grew louder, more insistent, like they were right in our ears. It felt like the walls were closing in, and I could hear my friends' breaths quickening in fear. Just when I thought we were going to be stuck there forever, the door flew open, and we stumbled out into the hallway, gasping for air. "We need to leave now," Sarah cried, her voice filled with terror. But as we hurried down the stairs, we heard the front door slam shut with a deafening bang, sealing us inside the house. The front door slammed with a finality that sent shivers down my spine. We rushed to it, pulling and yanking with all our strength, but it wouldn't open. It felt like something far stronger than us was keeping it sealed. "What's going on?" Sarah cried, her voice breaking. Panic was spreading through the group like wildfire. "It's locked. It has to be locked," Mike muttered, frantically searching for a way to force it open. But it wasn't locked. We all knew that. The door simply wouldn't budge, as if the house itself was holding us inside. "We have to calm down," Jack said, trying to take control of the situation, though his face was as pale as the rest of ours. "There's got to be another way out." "Basement," I shouted, remembering the old cellar door we had seen earlier in the kitchen. "There's a door down there. It might lead outside." Without another word, we made a beeline for the kitchen, the fear gripping us like a vice. As we ran, the house seemed to groan and creak like it was alive, like it knew we were trying to escape. The whispers followed us down the hall, growing louder and more menacing with every step. When we reached the basement door, I hesitated for just a moment. The darkness beyond it was thick, almost like a living thing, but there was no other choice. I yanked the door open, and the stairs creaked ominously as we descended into the cold, damp basement. It smelled of mold and rot, and the air was colder than ever down there. The only light we had came from the dim, flickering bulb hanging at the top of the stairs. Everything else was swallowed by shadows. "There's got to be an exit," Mike said, moving ahead, his voice shaky. But as we searched the walls, looking for a door or window that could lead us out, something strange began to happen. The shadows in the room seemed to shift, moving as if they were alive. At first, I thought it was just my eyes playing tricks on me, but then I saw it, a figure emerging from the darkness, slowly moving toward us. "There!" Sarah screamed, pointing toward the shadow. But when we looked, there was nothing, only the pitch-black basement surrounding us. Suddenly, the light flickered and went out, plunging us into complete darkness. I could hear everyone's frantic breathing as we fumbled around, trying to find our way. But the basement felt like a maze. The walls seemed to close in, and the shadows became darker, denser. Then, from the far corner of the room, came a low, guttural sound, a sound that made my blood run cold. We weren't alone down there. Something was in the basement with us. I could feel it, its presence, heavy and menacing. My heart pounded in my chest, and I could hear Sarah sobbing softly. "We need to get out. Now!" Jack shouted. But as we scrambled toward the stairs, the ground beneath us shook violently. It was like the entire house was coming alive, shaking and groaning as if in protest of our presence. Suddenly, I felt something cold brush against my arm. It wasn't a person. It was something else, something that shouldn't have been there. "Go! Go! Go!" Mike screamed, pushing us toward the stairs. But before we could reach the top, the basement door slammed shut, trapping us once again. We were trapped in the dark with whatever was down there, and there was no way out. The basement was suffocating in its darkness, and the feeling of dread was overwhelming. I could barely see my own hands in front of me, but I could feel the presence closing in. The air was thick, and every sound, our frantic breathing, the distant creaks of the house, the low growling noise from the corner, echoed, making everything worse. "We have to find a way out. We can't stay down here," Jack whispered, though his voice was trembling as much as the rest of us. Sarah was crying softly, her hands shaking uncontrollably. The fear in her eyes reflected what we all felt. We were trapped with something we didn't understand, something we couldn't see but could feel, lurking just beyond the edges of our senses. I took a deep breath, trying to steady myself. There's got to be another way. We can't be stuck down here forever. But even as I said it, I knew it wasn't true. The house felt like it was closing in around us, like it was alive, feeding off our fear. The growling sound grew louder, closer, and I could feel the ground vibrating beneath my feet, as if something massive was moving toward us. "Over there," Mike suddenly shouted, pointing toward the far wall. In the dim light from our phone screens, we could just barely make out what looked like a small, half-hidden door near the floor. It was old and covered in dirt, but it was our only hope. We rushed toward it, practically falling over each other in our desperation to escape. Jack yanked the door open, and a blast of cold air hit us, more intense than anything we'd felt so far. Beyond the door was a narrow tunnel, just big enough to crawl through. "This has to lead outside," Jack said, though his voice was filled with uncertainty. We didn't have any other options. One by one, we crawled into the tunnel, the growling sound behind us growing louder with every passing second. The tunnel was claustrophobic and pitch black, and the cold air made my skin prickle with goosebumps. But at least it was an escape. At least we were moving. For what felt like hours, we crawled, the tunnel seemingly endless. But then, just when I thought I couldn't go any further, I saw a faint light ahead. "Look!" I shouted, relief flooding my voice. We're almost there. But as we scrambled toward the light, something changed. The air grew thick again, and the tunnel walls seemed to close in. Behind us, the growling turned into a deafening roar, and I could feel the presence rushing toward us, like a storm bearing down. "Move faster!" Jack yelled, his voice filled with panic. We pushed ourselves to the limit, crawling as fast as we could, but the light at the end of the tunnel seemed further and further away. The presence was almost on us now. I could feel it. Its cold breath on the back of my neck, its unseen hands reaching out. And then, just as it felt like it was about to grab me, we burst out of the tunnel and into the open air. We collapsed onto the cold, wet ground outside, gasping for breath. The house loomed behind us, dark and silent, but we knew better now. It wasn't just a house. It was something else, something ancient and evil. We ran as fast as we could, not stopping until we reached the safety of our car.
The sudden darkness swallowed us
As we
whole,
drove away,
and I felt
I
my
looked back
heart
at the
race.
house one last
We
time.
were surrounded by
It
a
stood
silence
there,
so
motionless,
thick that it felt
but I could still
suffocating.
feel its eyes
my
on
hands
us,
trembled as I
watching,
tried to
waiting.
turn on my phone
None of us
flashlight,
ever spoke about
but the
that
screen
night again.
flickered and went
We
black.
never went back.
I could hear my
and the
friends
house
breathing,
was left to its silence,
quick and shallow.
But I know,
their fear
deep down,
palpable in the air.
that it's still there,
Jack,
waiting
Mike,
for its next visitors,
Sarah, I called
its
out,
next victims.
my voice
And I
barely
know
above
that we
a whisper.
barely made it out alive.
I couldn't tell where they were, and panic started to creep in. "Is everyone okay?" "I'm here," Jack's voice responded, shaky but present. "Me too," Sarah added, her voice quivering. "I think we need to get out of here," Mike shouted, fear dripping from his words. I took a deep breath, trying to steady myself. "Okay, let's stick together. We can't get separated. Just move slowly." We shuffled around in the dark, our hands outstretched in front of us, feeling for the walls. I could hear the wind howling outside, the rain battering against the windows, and the house creaking ominously. It felt like the walls were closing in on us, and I had to fight the urge to scream. "Let's head back to the living room," I suggested, trying to keep my voice steady. We slowly made our way back toward the hallway. Every sound echoed through the empty space, making my heart race. I could feel the cold air wrapping around us, and the shadows seemed to move, whispering secrets I didn't want to hear. Just as we reached the bottom of the stairs, a flash of lightning illuminated the room for a brief moment. In that split second, I saw something, a dark figure standing in the corner, just out of reach of the light. "Did you see that?" I gasped. "What?" Jack asked, his voice tight with fear. "There was something there." I pointed, my voice shaking. "Stop messing around," Mike said, though I could tell he was trying to hide his own fear. "It's probably just our eyes playing tricks on us." We moved cautiously, the sound of our footsteps drowned out by the storm outside. The fear hung in the air, thick and heavy. As we reached the living room, we gathered around the candles we had lit earlier. Their flickering flames offered some comfort against the darkness, but I couldn't shake the feeling that something was watching us. "Maybe we should just sit here until the storm passes," Sarah suggested, her voice small. "Yeah, let's just wait." I agreed, though I knew deep down that staying still wouldn't help us. As we sat there in the dim light, the wind howled outside and the rain pounded against the roof. It felt like the house was alive, breathing, shifting. The sound of the storm seemed to amplify our fear, making everything feel more intense. Suddenly, the candles flickered violently, and the flames danced wildly. We all jumped back, fear surging through us. Then, the lights flickered back on, illuminating the room in a harsh, artificial light. "Thank God," Mike breathed, relief flooding his voice. But just as quickly as the relief came, it vanished. The atmosphere felt charged, and we all turned to face the hallway. There was again the tapping sound, louder this time, almost like a voice calling out to us. "It's coming from upstairs again," I said, my heart racing. "We should check it out." "We can't let whatever this is control us," Jack said, his bravado shining through his fear. I nodded, even though every part of me wanted to run. "Let's go together." We climbed the stairs again, the wood creaking under our weight. The tapping sound grew louder, echoing through the narrow hallway. It was almost rhythmic, like a heartbeat, and it felt like it was leading us somewhere. As we approached the door at the end of the hallway, I could feel my stomach twist in knots. I glanced at my friends, their faces a mix of determination and fear. We pushed open the door, and my breath caught in my throat. The room was empty, just like before. But this time, there was something different. A chill swept through the air, and the shadows seemed to move in the corners. I could feel the weight of the silence pressing down on us, suffocating. Then, out of nowhere, the door slammed shut behind us, and we jumped, spinning around in shock. "Let us out!" Sarah yelled, panic rising in her voice. I grabbed the handle, but it wouldn't budge. It stuck. "I can't open it." We all pushed against the door, desperation filling the air. I could feel my heart pounding in my chest as we struggled. "Keep trying," I shouted, fear creeping into my voice. But then, the tapping returned, this time coming from inside the room. It was louder, more aggressive, almost angry. My mind raced, and I could feel the room closing in on us. What is happening? I shouted, panic rising. Something's in here with us, Jack yelled, his voice filled with fear. And just then, a shadow darted past us, moving too quickly for us to catch. I felt a cold breeze wash over me, and I couldn't shake the feeling of something watching us. We finally managed to shove the door open, and we spilled out into the hallway, gasping for breath. Go! Go! I shouted, and we raced down the stairs, fear propelling us forward. We stumbled into the living room, the candles flickering wildly, casting eerie shadows on the walls. The storm outside raged on, and I felt like we were trapped in a nightmare. Where do we go now? Mike gasped, looking around frantically. Let's just stay here. We need to figure out what's going on, I said, my heart racing. But just as I finished speaking, the lights went out again, plunging us back into darkness. Panic set in, and we could hear each other breathing heavily. The tapping began again, echoing through the room, drowning out our thoughts. We have to find a way out of here, Sarah cried, her voice filled with urgency. Maybe there's another door or a window we can use, Jack suggested. We felt our way around the room, searching for an escape. The walls felt cold and damp under our fingers, and the shadows seemed to stretch out towards us. Every creak of the house felt like a warning. Suddenly, the wind howled even louder, and I felt something brush against my arm. I jumped back, screaming. What was that? Calm down, Mike said, but I could hear the fear in his voice. I felt something. It touched me. I shouted, feeling hysteria creeping in. In that moment of panic, we all froze. The tapping had stopped, replaced by an unsettling silence. Then a deep, guttural laugh echoed through the room. It was low and menacing, sending chills down my spine. Let's get out of here. Now! I screamed, pushing toward the front door. We raced to the door, our hearts pounding. The wind howled outside, and rain lashed against the windows, but we couldn't think about that. We just needed to escape this place. As we reached the door, I yanked it open, and the storm welcomed us with open arms. We rushed outside, rain soaking us to the bone. But as we looked back at the bungalow, I realized something. It was still watching us, lurking in the shadows. The moment the lights went out, a heavy silence enveloped the bungalow. Our laughter faded into nervous whispers as we fumbled for our phones, desperately trying to turn on the flashlights. But as we clicked the buttons, all we got was the dim glow of our screens. What the hell? Why did the lights go out? Jack muttered, his voice barely above a whisper. Panic started creeping into our hearts. I think it's just the generator. It's old, remember? Mike said, trying to sound calm, but I could hear the tremor in his voice. We huddled together, casting shaky beams of light around the room. Shadows danced on the walls, and every creak of the old house sent shivers down our spines. The rain started to pour outside, adding to the ominous atmosphere. It was like the house was alive, responding to our fear. Let's stick together, I said, trying to keep everyone calm. We'll figure this out. But just as I said that, we heard it again, the tapping. It was louder this time, echoing through the halls. I could feel my heart racing. It's probably just the wind, I insisted, even though I didn't believe my own words. We decided to check the main floor first. As we moved toward the hallway, our flashlights flickered against the old wallpaper, casting eerie shadows that seemed to twist and turn. The tapping grew louder, more urgent, as if something was trying to get our attention. Let's just see what's going on, I said, my voice steady despite the fear pooling in my stomach. We walked cautiously, our footsteps muffled by the old wooden floor. The hallway stretched out in front of us, dark and foreboding. I took a deep breath, trying to muster the courage to go forward. We reached the first door on the left, a small room that looked like it used to be a study. I pushed the door open, and it creaked ominously. Inside, the air was colder, and the atmosphere felt thick with tension. Dust floated in the narrow beams of light from our phones. The room was filled with old books and furniture covered with white sheets, like ghosts waiting to be unveiled. "See anything?" Sarah asked, her voice trembling. "No," I replied, feeling a chill run down my spine. "Just old stuff." Suddenly, the tapping stopped. A heavy silence fell over us, making my skin crawl. "What do we do now?" Jack whispered. Before I could answer, I noticed a small figure in the corner of the room, a shadow that seemed to shift and move. My breath caught in my throat. "Did you see that?" I stammered. "What?" Mike asked, turning toward the corner. I think there's something there," I said, my voice shaking. We all strained to see, but the shadow was gone. Just then, the sound of a chair scraping across the floor echoed from the hallway, making us jump. It was as if the house itself was taunting us, inviting us deeper into its secrets. "We need to get out of here," Sarah said, her eyes wide with fear. "No way," Jack said. "We're not leaving. We can't let whatever this is scare us off. Let's explore. We came here for an adventure." Before I could protest, he marched out of the room, flashlight held high. I followed, heart pounding in my chest. The hallway felt longer now, darker. We crept toward the staircase, and the sound of rain drumming against the roof became a backdrop to our growing unease. As we reached the stairs, the tapping started again. It was fast, almost frantic. "It's coming from upstairs," I whispered, glancing at Mike. He looked just as scared as I felt. "Maybe we should just leave," he suggested, his voice shaking. But Jack was determined. "Let's check it out. We're not scared of a little noise, right?" Reluctantly, we agreed, our curiosity getting the better of us. We made our way up the stairs, the wood creaking under our weight. Each step felt like a mile, each creak echoing our fear. When we reached the top, the air felt colder, and the tapping was louder now, almost rhythmic. I glanced at Jack, and he nodded. "Let's go." We moved down the hallway, the flashlight beams cutting through the darkness. The doors on either side loomed like shadows, hiding whatever lay within. The tapping came from the last door at the end, and I felt my stomach drop. "Are you ready?" I asked, trying to mask my fear. Jack pushed the door open, and we stepped inside. The room was empty, save for a dusty old bed and a small dresser. But then we noticed it. A window was wide open, the rain pouring in, and the tapping sound was just the branches of a tree hitting the side of the house. Just a tree? I breathed, relief washing over me. But as I turned to leave, I noticed something on the floor, a small wooden box. It was old, covered in dust and cobwebs. Curiosity took over. I picked it up and opened it. Inside was a collection of old photographs, faded and yellowed with time. They showed families standing in front of the bungalow, smiling and happy. "Look at these," I said, showing them to the others. "These people look normal." Suddenly, the lights flickered back on, startling us. We looked around, unsure if we should feel relieved or more scared. Just then, a cold breeze swept through the room, sending chills down my spine. "What was that?" Sarah shrieked. Before I could respond, we heard the unmistakable sound of a door slamming shut somewhere in the house. Panic set in, and we rushed out of the room, back into the hallway. "What do we do now?" Mike yelled, his voice filled with fear. "We stick together," I replied firmly, even though I could feel my own fear creeping in. "Let's check the other rooms and then get out of here." We moved quickly, darting from one room to another. Each time we opened a door, I half expected something to jump out at us. but it was just more old furniture, dust, and shadows. Yet, with every creak and groan of the house, I felt the weight of unease pressing down on us. Finally, we reached the last room at the end of the hallway. This door looked different. It was heavier, and the wood was darker, almost blackened with age. I hesitated, glancing back at my friends. "Are we really doing this?" I asked, my voice barely a whisper. Jack stepped forward, determination in his eyes. "We have to. We can't leave without knowing." With that, he pushed the door open, and we stepped inside. The room was dark and cold. A faint light from our flashlights revealed a dusty old mirror on the wall. The air felt thick, almost suffocating. I looked at my reflection, and something didn't look right. It was like I could see shadows moving behind me, lurking in the corners of my vision. "Guys," I said, my voice trembling, "I don't like this." Before anyone could respond, the mirror cracked, a long line splitting through the glass. A cold wind rushed past us, blowing out our flashlights, leaving us in complete darkness. We stood outside, drenched by the pouring rain, trying to catch our breath. The storm raged around us, but our hearts were racing for a different reason. The bungalow loomed behind us, dark and ominous, as if it were a living entity, angry at our escape. "Did you hear that laugh?" Jack gasped, looking back at the house with wide eyes. "Yeah, it was terrifying," Sarah replied, her voice shaking. "What the hell was that?" "I don't know, but we can't go back in there," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. "We need to get away from this place." "But where do we go?" Mike asked, glancing around at the thick trees surrounding us. "We can't just wander into the forest. We need to find the road," I said firmly. "If we can get back to the car, we'll be safe." We started moving through the rain, my heart pounding with each step. The trees loomed overhead, their branches swaying in the wind, and I felt like they were closing in on us. Every rustle made me jump. Every shadow felt alive. The only sound was the rain hitting the leaves and the distant rumble of thunder. "Why did we even come here?" Jack murmured, frustration and fear mixing in his voice. "Let's just focus on getting out," I replied, pushing through the underbrush. The ground was muddy, and I slipped a few times, trying to keep my footing. As we walked, I couldn't shake the feeling that we were being watched. I glanced over my shoulder, half expecting to see something lurking in the shadows. The forest felt alive with a sinister energy, and I knew we needed to hurry. "Do you think the house is haunted?" Sarah asked quietly, her voice barely audible over the rain. "I don't know," I replied, but whatever that was, it wasn't friendly. We stumbled forward, the rain soaking us through. Every sound made my heart race. The crack of a branch, the distant rumble of thunder. It felt like we were trapped in a horror movie, and I was terrified of what might happen next. After what felt like hours of trudging through the rain, we finally saw a faint light in the distance. "Look!" Jack shouted, pointing. "That has to be the road." We hurried toward the light, relief flooding through us. As we got closer, I could see the outline of a street sign. "Yes, we're almost there," I exclaimed, adrenaline pushing me forward. But just as we reached the road, a sudden chill swept over me. I stopped, feeling the hairs on the back of my neck stand up. "Wait, something doesn't feel right." "What do you mean?" Mike asked, looking back at me. "I don't know. I just feel like we're not alone," I said, scanning the trees. "Let's just get to the car," Jack urged, glancing nervously around. "We can figure everything out there." We stepped onto the road, our hearts racing with the hope of safety. But the moment we crossed, the light flickered and the air turned heavy. I turned to look back at the bungalow one last time, and that's when I saw it, a shadowy figure standing at the door, watching us. Guys, I yelled, panic surging through me. We need to move. Now! We sprinted down the road, our feet pounding against the asphalt. The rain was still pouring, but I could barely feel it. All I could think about was that figure watching us from the bungalow. It felt like it was chasing us, urging us to turn back. Keep going, I shouted, pushing my legs harder. As we ran, I could hear the laughter again, echoing through the rain. It was taunting, like it knew we were scared, like it was playing with us. Don't look back, I yelled, trying to drown out the sound in my mind. We reached the edge of the road and spotted our car, parked beneath a flickering street lamp. There it is, Sarah cried out, relief flooding her voice. I fumbled with my keys, hands shaking as I tried to unlock the door. Come on, I muttered, feeling a rush of fear behind me. I could sense something drawing closer. Finally, the door clicked open and we all piled inside, slamming the doors shut behind us. I locked the doors and took a deep breath, trying to steady my racing heart. Did we make it? Mike asked, his voice trembling. I think so, I replied, glancing back at the dark road. But we need to get out of here. I started the engine, and the headlights cut through the rain, illuminating the path ahead. I hit the gas, and we sped away from the bungalow, the shadows of the trees fading in the distance. As we drove, the laughter slowly faded, but I could still feel it echoing in my mind. What just happened back there? Sarah whispered, her voice shaking. I don't know, I admitted, gripping the steering wheel tightly. But I don't think we should ever go back. The road stretched ahead of us, rain still pounding against the windshield. We were silent, each of us lost in our thoughts. The fear hung in the air, thick and suffocating. I could see the fear in my friend's eyes, and I knew we all felt the same way. The memory of the shadowy figure haunted me, and I couldn't shake the feeling that it was still watching us, even from a distance. The storm finally began to lighten, but my heart felt heavy with the weight of what we had just experienced. As we drove further away from the bungalow, I couldn't help but think about what lay behind us, about the darkness we had escaped but never truly understood. That place held secrets, stories untold, and perhaps it was better left undisturbed.